Hi, welcome back. Okay, this video might make some people mad because there's no hard evidence confirming what I'm about to say, but there's sure as hell a lot of clues that lead me to believe everything I say in this video. I just want to make sure everybody knows I'm not trying to be disingenuous and doing this for the sake of hating on Star Rail and getting views, just doing the same as usual and saying what I think. As always, I just want this game to get better because I genuinely love it, and so far I don't think it is getting any better, so let's talk about it. As we know, after a whole slurry of videos about power creep and 3.0 sucking came out during 3.0, Starrail put out an emergency developer radio, mainly talking about the story improvements they're going to make, which so far in 3.1 really did nothing, but they did put the deadline as 3.2, so I'll give them that. They finished off the developer radio with saying the following: "We will be adding richer combat gameplay and challenge goals to the game, in addition, including difficulty deploying older characters on the battlefield and the strengthening of these older characters are already on schedule." While this made everyone, including me, very hyped for a couple days, not only did the 3.1 livestream have zero mention or clue towards any sort of old unit buffs, and not only does the 3.2 beta have no mention or clues of these either, which was the deadline we were giving for these changes, but there are also multiple clues in the 3.2 beta that tell me that character buffs are either going to be disappointing, are never going to happen, or are happening in a very long time from now. And when it does happen, it probably won't matter. So in this video, I want to talk about how I think Star Rail deceived all of us with that final sentence in the 3.0 developer radio. Before we start though, you should like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Run Discord server for a fun and lovely community to hang out with. I also post pictures of my cat daily on there, so if you want free cat pics, go to the link in the description. Also, I will be talking about leaks of new features coming during the anniversary in 3.2, so just a disclaimer if you don't want to hear about those. Now, let's get on to it. So after the developer radio, everyone got really excited again about the game, at least until the 3.1 update, and those who were still a bit hopeful lost all the hope they had left during the 3.2 beta when nothing about character buffs was ever leaked or announced. My friends Axe and Fleur and I have been speaking about this topic a lot. We reached a unanimous conclusion that they really only said what they said at the end of the developer radio as a deceptive statement that forces people to shut up about the issue. Even if they are doing it, it doesn't seem like they're doing it for a very long time. Because if they were, then we would have leaks about it multiple patches ahead of schedule. Right now we have absolutely nothing. Shutting smaller CCs up about this topic was pretty important, it seems, because we were getting a ton of views talking about this topic, and a lot of people were expressing agreement with us and dissatisfaction with the game. Them putting this statement out there is just a way for them to force us to give them the benefit of the doubt. Well, they said they'll do it, I don't really have to talk about this anymore. Again, if they were actually planning on implementing old unit buffs right after that statement, and planning on doing so before the deadline they gave, we would have lots of news not only in the 3.1 livestream and 3.2 beta, but in more developer radios about these old unit buffs. You would also think that the goddamn anniversary of the game would have news of old unit buffs, but so far we have nothing. Now some of you may be thinking, well, maybe they'll announce old unit buffs during the anniversary. That sounds reasonable, doesn't it? And yes, that does actually sound pretty reasonable. Or it would have if we didn't have any leaks of everything they're going to discuss in the 3.2 developer livestream. Here's the thing, they're not discussing them. They could absolutely throw a neat curveball and actually talk about them, which I would really appreciate a ton, and it would certainly prevent me from quitting this game if the buffs were sufficient, but I have zero hope for it right now. So while there are some clues that lead me to believe what I just said in this previous paragraph, I still have a couple even stronger clues that help strengthen my point of view. The new feature I want to talk about is the new rerun system they're going to be adding, where you can customize your own 50-50 loss pool. Basically, they're going to add a few limited units to the standard pool, and you'll be able to choose which 7 units you would rather lose your 50-50s to. If Kafka, Jingyuan, Sila, and Silverwolf were added, for example, then you'll be able to replace each of these with, let's say, Clara, Wel, Tianqing, and Bailu. So your 50-50 loss pool is now Kafka, Jingyuan, Sila, Silverwolf, Himiko, Bronya, and Gepard. Now at first glance, this sounds absolutely f***ing great, but then you remember that you'll be able to get what used to be limited characters on the standard banner, and while that sounds absolutely f***ing great, there are a couple problems with it. Hoyo seems to operate by only ever adding changes or features that directly cost sales. Things that require a lot of effort or require them to wait for the long term to see real player retention, and revenue from that player retention doesn't really seem to be their style. When adding this new feature, they are no longer going to be getting any direct sales from any of the limited characters that they add to the new customizable standard pool, meaning buffing those characters up isn't really worth their effort by the way they calculate things. If something doesn't directly cause a player to spend, they probably won't add it. Even though buffing up old units would directly cause players to spend on both these old units' reruns and Eidolons, but would also indirectly keep these players satisfied with the state of the game, and keeping them spending money on new units as well, but they don't realize that. By putting them in the standard banner, which by the way, any character that is put on the standard banner isn't going to be getting any more reruns, they are forfeiting any amount of money they could have gained off of that character in the future. This means they won't buff them up. It's a stupid business model which we've spoken about many times in the past. Now there is another feature that has something to do with this one, which is actually pretty decent. They're going to introduce an item that you can trade 2 of to gain 1 5-star character, and the 5-star units that you can trade for that new item will either be cycled in and out depending on whatever they're feeling, or will be based on the 50-50 loss pool. This new item will be obtained from certain story quests, or from E6 plus character copies, so if you get an E7 Himiko or E7 Welt, you'll gain one of that item. It's certainly not a bad item, but it also means that these units that used to be limited are even more free than they are after the 50-50 pool change, which means they have even less of a reason to buff them up because well, these are just standard units, they don't really need to be powerful. I do kinda agree with that sentiment, but we've seen a pattern where almost every unit that gets added to a standard banner, and especially in a Hoyo game, turns out kinda mid. There are some exceptions to some team comps, but in the end you would have to invest pretty heavily into them to get a decent team out of them, which means they have way less value than an actual limited unit, which means they probably won't get buffed. Final thing I want to talk about is, even if character buffs do get implemented, even with these new systems they're putting in place, and even if they are implemented earlier than in like 3.6 or 3.7 or whenever they feel like it, they'll most likely just be multiplier buffs. This is fine for units like Jingliu and Honkai who could use some pretty significant multiplier boosts, but it won't really boost them up in the meta whatsoever unless their multipliers are more than doubled or even tripled. Jingliu does around 200k per skill, she will need to do 600k per skill to even begin to compete with Herda, and Danhangayo will need to do 4 times the damage he currently does to compete with Maide. Simply giving them insane multiplier buffs would be viable, but it would also mean that other units would still have some issues. Steela's Insurgence isn't going to proc unless you kill an enemy, and even though it does become easier with multiplier buffs, it still won't be enough, or anywhere near the level that she would have been able to proc it back in the day. An even worse example is someone like Silverwolf, who even if she had twice the amount of rest reduction or 20% extra def shot on her ult, would still be worse than any other support option, except maybe she'll be slightly better than Pella now for Acheron, unless it's an on-element scenario with 5 targets, which is almost all scenarios you're going to be using Acheron in anyway. Silverwolf and Seela, and even still Jingliu and Danhang Ayel, not to mention almost all other 1.x units, and some units from 2.x like Sparkle and Black Swan, won't become viable by simply doubling or even tripling their damage multipliers or increasing their supportive multipliers. They will need to get some extra buffs and kit reworks to become competitive. Maybe they could be a lot less of a hassle to use in battle, or they could be a lot more F2P friendly, or their E1s and E2s could give them an insane amount of value that would make it at least similar worth to a Maide or Herda E1 or E2. Now Eidolons are a lot riskier since making them overpowered is very predatory, but since they're much older units I do think it's fine because you can just get them on the reruns. I've already given many examples of how older character buffs would have to look for these older units to become competitive again, so I won't really go into that in this video, it's plenty long already, and I really don't think it's worth to do it either, because it'd be a waste of my time and yours, since I still believe that character buffs won't be coming for a very long time, won't be coming for any unit that goes into the 50-50 pool, and will at the most be simple multiplier buffs. And as a last message, I really do hope that this video ages like milk. I really hope I'm wrong. If they do announce something about it in 3.2 and it actually looks good, then I'll keep hope for this game, but still probably move on to other content as well besides it, and at the very least until the buffs are actually implemented and 5-star March 7th comes out. I've been speaking about the global passive stuff ever since it came out, and while I do think it's one of the worst things they're ever going to introduce to StarRail, if they at least offset it by making old units actually viable and actually good to use again, I'll be mostly fine with it. However, again, I have zero hope for the future of this game because it's Hoyoverse and they're bound to fuck it up. So that's it. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, whether it's StarRail, gacha, or gaming in general. You should also join the Express Train Discord server for a fun and lovely community to hang out with, also about all of these topics, while also containing pictures of my cat as a bonus. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.